When people talk about European Union tech regulation, they often imagine it as this massive, immovable, bureaucratic asteroid drifting slowly through space. But for someone like me, someone who's spent most of his life trying to push humanity toward a multiplanetary future, it has always felt a bit like launching a rocket through a forest of paperwork. And I remember the first time I sat down with EU regulators thinking, okay, this should be simple. We're just trying to build electric cars, rockets, AI systems, and maybe save the world in the process. But then I realized the EU doesn't do simple. The EU does frameworks, directives, cross-border harmonizations, guidelines on guidelines, and regulations that regulate the regulations. And honestly, it was fascinating because every discussion felt like a collision between two galaxies. My galaxy, which is basically made of rapid iteration, failing fast, fixing fast, and moving even faster. And their galaxy, made of caution, process, and the philosophical conviction that no innovation should slip through without being examined under a microscope the size of Belgium. And I'd sit there thinking, okay, they want to know how many nanoseconds an autonomous driving system will take to decide whether a cardboard box is dangerous. And I'd say, well, the car needs to just figure it out. And they'd respond with something like, yes, but have you documented the precise ethical hierarchy of that decision? And then suddenly we were in a discussion about algorithmic transparency, cross-border data flows, the Digital Services Act, the AI Act, and this whole idea that technology must be understandable, even by people who don't actually use the technology. And meanwhile, I'm thinking that if we required every organism on Earth to explain precisely how its nervous system works before being allowed to exist, we'd still be single-celled, but that's the EU. They don't just want guardrails, they want guardrails for the guardrails. And I get it, I really do. Especially when you consider the scale of digital power, AI models capable of generating entire realities, platforms that connect billions of people, and rockets that return from space and land themselves like they're obeying gravity in reverse. And so, every time I engaged with EU regulators, I found myself telling this ongoing story, the story of why we can't slow down too much, why pushing boundaries matters, why innovation doesn't thrive when it's shrink-wrapped in red tape. And at the same time, I'd hear their story. The story of a continent that remembers what happens when power grows without accountability. A continent that sees data not as a commodity, but as a piece of the human soul. A continent that wants AI to be safe because it knows what unsafe systems can do. And so, strange as it sounds, we ended up in this cosmic tug-of-war between speed and caution, between building the future and making sure the future doesn't bulldoze the present. And sometimes it felt like we were arguing about the mass of a neutron star using a spreadsheet. But over time I realized that the EU wasn't trying to block innovation. It was trying to steer it. And I had to adapt, had to explain why Starlink could help connect rural Europe, why electric vehicles could shift the entire energy grid, why AI needed open competition instead of walled gardens. And even though I kept saying, look, we're trying to make life better on Earth and also maybe on Mars, they'd reply with, that's great, but under Article 27, subsection 14, you still have to provide documentation. And somehow we kept going. Me with my rockets and robots and relentless optimism, them with their policy drafts and legal definitions of high-risk AI. And the further we went, the more it felt like the entire story of European tech regulation was actually the story of humanity's attempt to understand technology before technology understands us. And though I might joke about the paperwork, the truth is the tension between innovation and regulation is part of what keeps the system stable, because if you go too fast, you crash. If you go too slow, you stagnate. And somewhere in the middle, in that chaotic zone where rockets fly, electric cars accelerate, AI models learn, and regulators rewrite definitions for the 10th time in a single meeting. That's where the future is actually being negotiated. And honestly, it's messy, it's slow, it's sometimes hilarious, but it's also kind of beautiful because it means people care, they're paying attention, they want a future worth having, and even though I keep pushing for acceleration, I've learned that sometimes the universe needs a little friction to keep things from spinning apart, and maybe that's the real story of the EU and tech. This wild, improbable dance between dreamers and rule makers, both trying to shape the same future from opposite sides of the launchpad. So, there I was again, somewhere in Brussels or maybe Strasbourg. I swear those buildings all look like they were designed by someone trying to 3D print democracy, and I'm in another room with another group of experts who have read every regulation, every directive, every footnote of every footnote, and they ask me to explain why technology moves so fast that even the manuals become outdated before the ink dries, and I tell them that's just the nature of exponential curves, that once you hit escape velocity, the ground rules don't just shift, they evaporate, and you have to build new ones mid-flight while hoping the engines don't stall. And they respond with something like, "Yes, but can you ensure algorithmic traceability without compromising fundamental rights as enumerated in Articles 8 and 21? And I'm thinking, I'm literally trying to land rockets on floating platforms. We don't have time to create a philosophical biography for every line of code. But I don't say that out loud because they're genuinely trying to solve a real problem, which is how to keep AI from turning into some kind of digital Wild West where nobody knows who's accountable when things go wrong. And I get that, truly, because the more powerful a system becomes, the more careful you have to be. But the EU does careful like it's an art form, like they're painting frescoes of caution across every sector. And you know what? There's actually something admirable about that, because it forces us, the builders, to think not just about what we can do, but what we should do. And there's this one moment I remember where someone asked me if I believed AI should follow European values. And I thought about that for a long time, because values aren't lines of code. They're stories, they're histories, they're scars that entire civilizations carry. And Europe has a long memory, maybe longer than anyone else's. So when they talk about protecting people, they're not just talking about now, they're talking about centuries of learning the hard way. And in that moment, I realized we weren't debating rules. We were debating futures, their future, my future, everyone's future, and every regulation was like a steering wheel being welded onto the hull of civilization as it speeds ahead. And maybe the weld is slow, and maybe the metal is heavy, but it's still steering us somewhere. And that's when I told them, in this hypothetical, fictional universe, of course, that innovation doesn't have to be a runaway train. It can be a guided rocket, thrust controlled, trajectory calculated, but only if regulators and innovators stop acting like adversaries and start behaving like co-pilots. Because the universe isn't going to wait for us to finish paperwork. The stars aren't filing forms to justify their existence. Mars isn't sitting there saying, please submit a triplicate safety assessment before landing. And if humanity is going to make the leap, then maybe we need systems that protect people without paralyzing progress. And as I looked around that room full of experts, I imagined what this whole regulatory dance will look like in 50 years when AI is integrated into everything and rockets travel like airplanes, and the idea of arguing over cross-border data flows feels as quaint as arguing over who owns the air. And maybe the EU will still be refining its clauses and sub-clauses, and maybe I'll still be launching things into space, or who knows. Maybe I will be on Mars, watching from a dome while they debate the first Interplanetary Digital Services Act. But wherever we are, this tension will still exist. The push to go faster and the pull to be safer. And in a strange way, that tension is the fuel. It's the reason progress doesn't explode or implode. It just moves. Sometimes slower than I want, sometimes faster than they expect, but always forward. And maybe that's the real legacy of this whole regulatory saga. Not the documents, not the hearings, not the lengthy discussions about algorithmic risk tiers, but the realization that even when we disagree violently on pace, we're still walking step by step toward the same horizon, and the only real question is how far we'll dare to go before the next rulebook is written.